Welcome back, everyone. Last video I made was anecdotal kind of view of why pedophilia is not a sexual orientation, that it is a mental illness. Well, I did some research. I wasn't able to get a hold of an exact person in the psychological field. I did do some more research, and I did find the psychological evidence and medical evidence to back up that claim. It's going to be kind of a weird video. I'm going to switch back and forth between two different cameras because some of the articles are quite long. And one of them isn't, and I think I can do that from here. But and since I don't script, that would be really hard for me to remember the entire article. I'm not gonna do that. But it would appear it is a mental illness. And there are three things that I want to go through. There's a psychological group, it's kind of a disease group, medical type thing, but they do cover mental disorders and mental illnesses as well. And I think the coup de grace of what I'm going to go over first and foremost is the perspective of it from what is called non-acting, non-offending, anti-contact. This person who wrote an article about it is actually a member of the Virtuous Pedophiles, and they are very, very against actually going out and committing the act. These are people that they are self-admitted pedophiles, and they are against the actual act of pedophilia. That should speak volumes. And while I disagree with pedophilia, I think if you have that type of mental illness, that is probably the healthiest way of dealing with it. And this person will go into that. So we'll go over all of that. So I want to begin with the virtuous pedophile person that does not want to contact and does not want to be an offender. And I was really surprised about the things that they had to say. And to top that off, the real issue is groups like Heart Progress, LGBTP, P for pedophile, not pansexual, and people like Cartograph and Omnipolitics 16, they're outright, and Jen's channel too, are outright saying, and I've seen the channels, I've seen the arguments, I've seen the debates, they are outright saying that they think it's a human rights issue and that they should be allowed to explore their sexuality with children. And here's a group of pedophiles that says, no, we shouldn't. So let's go over that first. I'll meet you over at the other camera. All right, so here we go by Edgar Wiggin. You can follow this person on Twitter. Pedophiles about pedophilia, non-offending, anti-contact pedophile. I am sexually attracted to kids, but no sex with kids is wrong. And this article that they made is pedophilia is as a mental disorder. And what is pedophilia? Is it a mental disorder, a sexual orientation, a choice, a lifestyle? There's a lot of controversy over this subject, but let's get to the obvious out. Let's get the obvious out of the way first. Pedophilia is not a lifestyle because pedophilia is not an action, but rather a condition of being sexually attracted to prepubescent children. Pedophilia is also not a choice because no one gets to choose whom or what they are sexually attracted to. No heterosexual man has ever woken one morning, and we know that. It basically comes down to deciding whether pedophilia is a mental disorder or sexual orientation. I will dedicate another post to, okay? And so let me start by saying that determining whether something qualifies as a mental disorder should be a scientific question and never a social, legal, or political one. Scientists with knowledge of normal or typical human mental functions should be the ones to determine whether something falls out of baseline spectrum by a wide enough margin that it warrants being called disordered, ill, or diseased. In the field of mental health, this should be the psychiatric profession
While everyone can have an opinion, after all, they're like asses, aren't they? This should not be a matter of beliefs or opinions, but rather hard scientific facts. In addition, there are a number of questions that need to be evaluated in order to come to a conclusion on this topic. For instance, what is a mental disorder? What is a mental illness or disease? This may seem like semantics, but the term can be interpreted quite differently, and the perceptions to these different terms are different. What are the criteria for determining, and I talked about this with what the criteria is, and I want to show you where they get their information from. One of the most prominent such organizations is the American Psychiatric Association, American Psychiatric Association, APA, which publishes the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM, typically considered the Bible of psychiatry. That's an on. Okay. The World Health Organization, WHO, also publishes a similar manual called the International Classification of Diseases, the ICD. Though not specific to mental health, it does include a classification on what are considered mental diseases or disorders. And then they go into what is a mental disorder, illness, disease, and they talk about that. And it's basically going over the same stuff that I went over, is that, it has to, thinking or feeling, mood may affect their ability to relate to others, function on a daily basis. Mood, thinking, and behavior affect your ability to function, makes you miserable, cause problems in your daily life. Symptoms can be managed. Thought and or behavior resulting in an inability to cope with life's ordinary demands and routines. So I think we have a pretty good idea of this is the main part, is affecting an individual's ability to function normally in their daily lives. Does pedophilia affect behavior? I'm sure many people would argue that pedophilia does indeed affect behavior, making people sexually abuse children. However, as I have pointed out in many of my previous articles, the definition of pedophilia in and of itself does not describe any inability to control one's actions. Therefore, we are in control of our actions at all times. If pedophilia actually impaired our ability to control our actions, its diagnosis could be used in court of law as a sort of insanity plea to receive reduced sentencing, since we would not be fully responsible for our actions. I challenge anyone to try this approach to see how it works out, but something tells me it would not have the desired results. By contrast, if you look at disorders like schizophrenia or obsessive-compulsive disorder, one can see how the disorders themselves have a direct effect on one's behavior, often making the subjects of such disorders actually incapable of resisting, taking certain actions. They are often compelled by inner voices or extreme discomfort and anxiety to do certain things, and resisting them supposes a gargantuan effort. This is not the case with pedophilia, as I've mentioned many times before. Does pedophilia affect mood? Leaving the discussion of pedophilia versus pedophilic disorder for a little later. Okay, the diagnosis of pedophilia does not describe any inherent effect on one's mood, and I can see that. But yeah, I mean, they do mention, in comparison, mental disorders such as depression and bipolar disorder clearly have an effect on one's mood themselves, and not as any kind of side effect. They do talk about the depression and stuff that one might feel because they are a pedophile, and the flack that they get from mainstream culture. But that's not directly because they are a pedophile. That is because, what they are is looked down upon. It'd be kind of like if you got the news that you had cancer. Depression is not the result of cancer, is not like directly linked. It's just that's a normal response to having cancer. And does pedophilia affect thoughts? This is a tricky one, and maybe we need to go a little bit into semantics here. Thoughts are different than feelings. As I mentioned in my post about sexual fantasies, they present themselves at a different level of consciousness. And unlike feelings, they can be somewhat controlled or repressed. Whether they should or should not is a different story. Pedophiles feel sexual attraction to children, meaning that when we see a child we find attractive, we experience certain involuntary or automatic chemical reactions in our bodies in the exact same way as when a normal heterosexual man sees an attractive adult woman. These feelings don't automatically lead to sexual thoughts. They may or may not, depending on the situation or the person. Pedophilia does not automatically make pedophiles think that sex with children is okay and should be morally and legal. Ooh, this is really important. Pedophilia does not automatically make pedophiles think that sex with children is okay and should be morally and legally acceptable. You hear that, Omnipolitics? Do you hear that, Cartograph? Do you hear that, LGBTP? Do you hear that, Heart Part Progress? Do you hear that, Jen? Do you hear that, Jenny Lover? And this is evidenced by the fact that there is an entire movement of us in the Virtuous Pedophiles, I told you they were a member of this, Virtuous Pedophiles community, that is firmly against adult-child sex and doesn't advocate for legalizing it or removing age of consent laws. I can agree to that. I concede that some pedophiles may be subject to cognitive distortions. Jen, Cartograph, Hard Progress, OmniPolitics 16, which in a way, and this is coming from somebody who is a pedophile, so yeah. How am I misrepresenting them? I don't think I am. I think I pretty much pinged the nail on the head. I think this is a mic drop. Sorry. Cognitive distortions, which in a way are a form of altered thoughts by which they may interpret children's innocent kindness or admirations as flirting or some other kind of romantic sexual feeling. OmniPolitics 16, you definitely fall into this category. This wouldn't be much different to how a heterosexual man may misinterpret a woman's friendly behavior towards him. Of course, the adult woman is much better equipped to deflect any attempts at sexual... Listen to this. This person sounds sane. Of course, the adult woman is much better equipped to deflect any attempts at sexual interaction from the man than a child is. This is a pedophile saying this. They sound like they have their head screwed on. They know they have a mental illness. They know it is harmful to a child's psychological and physical well-being. They know that. They've come to peace with this. Why can't you do it, OmniPolitics 16? Why can't you do it, Jen? Why can't you, Cartograph? What is the deal? But that hardly has any bearing on whether this kind of cognitive distortion is an indicator of a mental condition other than being in love. All in all, we could say that pedophilia may affect thoughts, but not necessarily in a clear and direct way, at least if you compare and contrast with disorders such as paranoid personality disorder, where the subject is consistently invaded by thoughts of others' motivations being suspect or malevolent, or of being constantly followed, or narcissistic personality disorder. These are disorders that in and of themselves clearly affect the subject's thought process and patterns, but none of these symptoms are inherent to pedophilia in any way. Does pedophilia affect feelings? I guess we could definitely say that pedophilia affects one's feelings, since it is defined as a feelings of sexual attraction to children. However, we should note that affecting feelings is only mentioned in one of the 4 definitions of mental illness that I quoted. The APA mentions emotion, but emotions and feelings are not the same. Of course, being a pedophile can make someone sad. This is what I was talking about. But this is once again a side effect of what it means to be a pedophile in the world we live in, not a direct effect on pedophilia. Does pedophilia impair normal day-to-day functioning? I believe here is where it becomes more clear that pedophilia, and potentially all other described pedophilias, is not like any other mental disorder. Just being attracted to children doesn't directly impair one's ability to function normally in all practical aspects of life. One can take care of oneself and is not inherently in need of assistance, monitoring, or medication in order to function. It's true that pedophilia, in a way, impairs our ability to form romantic and sexual relationships with the people we are naturally attracted to, but while forming or having relationships can be a very important aspect of one's life to achieve happiness, it is certainly not a requirement, and plenty of people are happy without relationships for many different reasons. Furthermore, it is far from essential to live a life as a productive member of society. Pedophilia itself entails no inherent cognitive, physical, or mental impairment. However, if you look at disorders such as autism, it is clear it has the potential to severely impact one's ability to function in life and perform even some of the most basic tasks. I realize there are many degrees of autism, and different individuals diagnosed within the autism spectrum have differing degrees of impairment, but they all have some degree. Current classification of pedophilia in the DSM. In addition, pedophilia can be the cause of additional mental conditions, which are side effects, as I described them earlier. Imagine growing up and suddenly realizing that the people you are attracted to haven't quite agreed with you for the past few years. Desperately hoping for it to just be a phase that will soon pass, only to realize a couple of years down the road that it's not the case, and that you are in fact a pedophile. Imagine going on the internet searching for information to try to figure out what's wrong with you and seek support, only to find scores of comments from people saying that you are a monster, the scum of the earth, the lowest of the low, and how you are destined to become a child molester. You are automatically assumed to be one already, and deserve a horrible death for something you never took an active part in being. This can lead a young person growing up into a terrible place that is incredibly common among pedophiles to suffer a wide range of emotional illness. This person does talk about, they talk about in here seeking out help through psychotherapy and medications. So there's plenty of options out there. Okay, so this article even came from a pedophile, and some of it's kind of hard to swallow for me, but I mean, Jen Lover, you say I'm not representing them correct. So this is from a pedophile's point of view that does not agree, like it says right here at the very top, non-offending, anti-contact pedophile. But they know that it's wrong to perform sex acts on children. They know that. They don't want to do it. They know that it's mentally harmful and physically harmful to a child. They know that. So they take steps to do the right thing and make it so that they don't.
I decided to go with a different lighting because I like dark. I like things that are dark. I would do this candlelit, but people are obsessed with audio quality and visual quality. That's okay. I understand. So now we're going to go to the WebMD article. I know that was a really long article. The WebMD article is pretty long, but it's not as long, and it's broken up into segments. So let's go back over to the other camera, and we'll go through that.
All right, so here we go. I'm just going to go over the key points here. What is pedophile? What is a pedophile? A pedophile is a person who is sustained sexual orientation toward children, generally age 13 or younger, Blanchard says. Assuming Blanchard is some kind of mental health expert. And this is really interesting, and I found this in the psychological article that I read in the other video that I made. Not all pedophiles are child molesters, or vice versa. Child molesters are defined by their acts. Pedophiles are defined by their desires. Some pedophiles refrain from sexually approaching any child for their entire lives, but it's not clear how common that is. Does the medical community consider pedophilia to be a mental disorder? Yes. Yes, it does. The American Psychiatric Association has included pedophilia in a diagnostic and statistical manual of mental disorders since 1968. In the DSM, which is updated periodically, pedophilia has been grouped with other paraphilias, which the APA defines as recurrent, intense, sexually arousing fantasies, sexual urges, or behaviors that involve children, non-human subjects, or other non-consenting adults, or the suffering or humiliation of one's partner. Pedophiles would be diagnosed with pedophilic disorder either if their attractions toward children are causing them guilt, anxiety, alienation, or difficulty in pursuing other personal goals, or else if their urges cause them to approach children for sexual gratification in real life. Can pedophilia be treated? Yes. Although most experts do not think a person's feelings of pedophilia are curable, therapy may help them manage those feelings and not act on them. Some patients at high risk of committing sexual offenses may need medications to reduce their sex drive. Are pedophiles only attracted to children? Some pedophiles may be as attracted to adults as they are to children, but it's hard to know how common that is. That's because most pedophilia research is based on people who were arrested for sexual offense against children, and they may tend to exaggerate their sexual interest in adults to seem more normal. Is pedophilia more common among men or women? Pedophilic disorder is far more common among men than women, but women do have this disorder as well. Can pedophilia develop in an adult who had been attracted to adults? This is very unlikely, although some people may become adults before they become fully aware their strongest sexual attractions are still toward children and not toward their peers. Are pedophiles typically attracted to children of the opposite sex, same sex, or is there no particular pattern? Most pedophiles have a definite preference for one sex or the other, but it's tough to estimate the percentage of pedophiles who are heterosexual, bisexual, and homosexual. See, these are sexual orientations. Homosexual, bisexual, heterosexual. What would you want people to know about the stereotypes of pedophiles? People do not choose to be attracted to children or adults any more than they choose to be attracted to males or females. If there is any choice in the situation, it is how pedophiles manage their lives once they become fully aware of the direction of their sexual interests and the societal prohibitions against expressing them. So that pretty much backs up what I was saying, and this is, a psychological read right here. I mean, and if a man or woman has feelings that may be within the range of pedophilia, even if they've never acted upon those feelings, what should they do? Get help! People who are troubled by their sexual attraction to children should speak to professional help rather than try to deal with this problem on their own. He suggests starting with a family practitioner, although it may take several rounds of referrals, or search for a sex therapist in your city. Most areas of North America have mandatory reporting laws that override patient confidentiality. These require the clinician to report instances of child sexual abuse or probable imminent abuse to designate authorities, and that's actually true with depression and suicidal thoughts, or sociopathy and thoughts of murder. So they have to report that if they feel that you are a harm to yourself or others. They have to report it. It's by law. They have to. They absolutely have to. So there you go. This backs up. This is basically the arguments that I was making from personal perspective, anecdotal evidence. This is the actual evidence from a psychological medical background. So I would love to hear what you have to say about that, Jenny Lover and Jen and OmniPolitics 16 and Cartograph. I will leave the links to all this in the description below as always, so feel free to comment, ask questions. I'd be glad to carry on a debate in the comment section. I don't have a problem with that. At some point, though, the debate, if it gets a little too long, I would recommend just setting up kind of a debate live stream or a kind of voice chat and debate about it there. So, but I would definitely agree with this. If you are a pedophile, get help. Even that virtuous pedophile person said, get help. Pretty simple. There are psychiatrists and psychologists that are equipped to deal with this type of problem. Seriously. It does affect a child's psychology and physical well-being.
All right, so now we're on to the Wikipedia page, and I wasn't expecting much from Wikipedia, but they actually had a pretty good article, so I thought I would go ahead and read it. And it says, you can follow along there, pedophilia or pedophilia is a psychiatric disorder in which an adult or older adolescent experiences a primary exclusive sexual attraction to prepubescent children. Although girls typically begin the process of puberty at age 10 to 11, and boys at age 11 or 12, the criteria for pedophilia extend the cutoff point for prepubescence to age 13. A person who is diagnosed with pedophilia must be at least 16 years old and at least 5 years older than the prepubescent child for the attraction to be diagnosed as pedophilia. So basically, you won't even be considered a pedophile until you've gone over puberty and you're at least 16 years old. And then it goes on to talk about the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which again involving intense recurring sexual urges towards the fantasies about prepubescent children that have either been acted upon or which case the person with the attraction distresses the interpersonal difficulty. And then it goes into child abuse and stuff like that. So that being said, I think the next video that I might do one on the psychological and physical effects that children who have been victims of sex acts from adults. And I said when I started this that I'm really going to go after this. Now, with the concept of saying, of the people who are saying they're pedophiles, they know that they have a mental illness, and they seek treatment, and they don't want to hurt the child, they don't want to act upon it, they realize that it's a bad thing, and they're trying to reach out to society to say, hey, this isn't a predatorial thing for them, that it's a mental illness. I think that's one thing. I might be able to be like, okay, I can see that. At least you're admitting that there's harm in the action, and that it is a mental condition. That it's not like an orientation like homosexuality, bisexuality, or heterosexuality. They don't call it pedosexuality. They don't call it that. It's pedophilia. So there's plenty of psychological and medical evidence, many years of psychological research that goes into this, and many documentations of it to support what I'm proclaiming. That yes, indeed, it is a mental disorder. It's not a sexual orientation. So I really would like to see this stop on YouTube with OmniPolitics 16, Jen, and Cartograph, Heart Progress. I want to see the LGBTP Okay, you're not an orientation. Stop trying to attach yourself to the lesbian, transgender, bisexual, gay movement. It's no, it's not going to happen. So, kudos to those who are pedophiles and recognize it is a mental illness, and they've sought out treatment and sought out help, and they do everything in their power to not do anything obstructive to a child's well-being. It still makes me nervous. It still makes me a little edgy, but at least you're acknowledging that it is a mental illness and that you're going about the efforts of getting help. And I would say that that's probably the best you can do. And if you do act on it, I'm sorry, you need to serve time. That it's not acceptable to do that to a child. It's not acceptable to impose your will on someone else. And even that person that I read from the article that they wrote, even they said that a child doesn't even know what they're saying yes to. So, I might go over the damages that it does cause to children, because I think that's an important subject matter to go over as well. And with that, I made mentions about the comments, so like, share, subscribe, comment. Last video I forgot to mention this. I try to mention it in all videos. Hit the bell button. And with that, I am out.